Hello my friends and welcome back to another video, and a quite different video today as we're going to be doing a tier list. But as usual I'm joined by some lovely guests. Firstly starting off with Ken. Hello my friend.
Hi.
We're also joined by TolkienTube aka Gallifane.
Hey, it's great to be here, and go check out my links in the description.
Of course, and they'll always be there. And talking about links, we have Nikki as well,
Maegovan and Melanin.
always loving the Elvish. And finally we have Enzo returning again. Hello my friend.
Hello, good evening everybody.
So, in today's video we're going to be doing a tier list, and in fact a tier list of all the potential spin-off Amazon Lord of the Rings shows. And of course some of these Amazon don't have the rights to, but we're still going to be potentially going through them anyways. It's just a all for all basically. So as you can see at the bottom here, I have around about 12 to 13 shows, and we'll go through each one individually. Firstly starting off with Tom Bombadil, the Tom Bombadil show. So Ken, where would you put it in this rank? Actually, before Ken, I'd like to say that we have the Valor tier, which is the best one that we want to see the most being adapted by Amazon. Then we have Maya, then we have Average, we have Meh, and then we have Alfred, if you remember from the Hobbit movies, which is probably one of the worst characters. But yeah, Ken, take it away, starting off with you for Tom Bombadil.
I have to be brutally honest and put it in meh because I like the Tom Bombadil chapters in the book. I think they're fine, but I don't, when you put it on the screen and you actually depict it, it has the capacity to be, one, quite silly, very fairy tale, and two, kind of tangential to everything else that's happening in Middle-earth, because it doesn't really, the story of Tom and really kind of his backstory doesn't really, intrude on anything that's happening in Middle-earth at large. So it's kind of, he's in this strange bubble of his own. Very, very weird. Not the greatest thing for a TV series within the construct of a larger franchise.
What does everybody else think? Do you agree with Ken and putting it in Meh?
I would go a little bit lower, maybe to Alfred. I just don't think it would be something that a lot of people would watch. And it would have a much different tone than all of the other Lord of the Rings movies and shows, everything like that. Like the Lord of the Rings, they kept it out because not only it was a little bit unnecessary, but I think it was also really contrary to the tone, much like Gimli's behavior as well as Merry and Pippin's sometimes was. So I would put it in Alfred.
I would put it in average, just to even it out. Just because, I don't know, like, I have always liked the storyline of Tom Bombadil. What I think is that they would need a lot more freedom to make it into, sort of mold it into a more captivating story that doesn't feel so childlike. But it also has great potential as like a sort of children's story, animated.
series?
Yeah,
Animated. It's a
yeah.
good idea.
I think that Tom Bombadil could work wonderfully as that. So I would definitely put him in average because I just love the story about him and Goldberry. And I think that even though most of it is described in rhymes and like when you're reading it, it is a little bit, it's beautiful, but it's a little silly. So I know it would take a lot of work to create the actual storyline, but I would love to see it.
Finally with you, Enzo.
I think it would work well as a cartoon, a kind of series of short adapting the adventures of Tom Bombadil,
Interesting.
without narrative or just a silly and whimsical cartoon. So meh.
So I agree that, should we put it in Meh? I think that cultivates everyone's opinions. Do you guys agree? Meh?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that's in there now. Moving on to our next one, which is The Children of Hurin. Who wants to start off? Well, we can start with you, Ken. Go on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I personally think it would make a great movie or a couple of movies, but even as a TV series, I'll put it way up there. because it's excellent. I think it's Tolkien's best written work outside of the Lord of the Rings, up in Valor. For me,
Ooh,
I think it's
that's
fantastic.
quite a high shout.
Terrific.
Any agreements or disagreements?
I
I
agree.
I agree with
Yeah, I agree too. I
Voila.
think it's a beautiful story. Yeah, definitely. I would love to see it.
Unanimously put in Valor. And the next one's going to be quite an interesting one, in fact, as it is a Lord of the Rings Amazon remake. So,
No,
no?
no,
No.
please
Well, I think a
no.
while ago, the OneRing.net said that Amazon bought the rights to the Lord of the Rings, so it's, if that's true, which it might not be, there's a decent chance it's not, it's just rumor. But if it is true, then there is a very good chance that we're going to see it within the next decade. But I would put that at average, I think. I don't really think it needs a remake. The only thing it's gonna succeed in is making people angry, because you can't really beat the trilogy that was already made.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of feel like it's too early. It's much too early. Like remakes, sometimes the remakes are better, but at the moment, because it's so close to the original ones, although I say that, but they were made a long time ago. I still
Mhm.
feel like it's too
Are they
early.
not?
And like the
Yes,
prosthetics on the orcs worked perfectly well. The graphics, especially with the re-released 4K UHD version, it looks excellent. I don't have it, but I've seen comparisons, and it looks really, really good, just like a very modern movie. If they do remake something, I think it should be The Hobbit, because that's where they really messed up on all of the
Yeah.
orcs, the animation, and debatably even the plot, characters, and different stuff like that.
I definitely agree. I would put it in meh or
Meh?
even Alfred actually. But that's just my feelings about it at the moment because I'm so attached to the originals. If they were to remake it, I would say they should do it as a series because then it won't be a direct sort of violation or offense to the movies, I feel. Which means they have a lot more potential to maybe bring in the characters that Peter Jackson decided to skip
Which is right next to us,
change it
Tom
a little.
Bombadil. Exactly right
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So, Enzo, any final thoughts from you as well before I finish?
No. Alfred.
Okay, so another rule that I hadn't mentioned is that we need to have at least all these categories filled. So it looks like we've had a few Alfreds, we had one average. So, would you guys agree with me putting in Alfred?
Yes.
I would say meh instead, if
Yeah,
we're
Wow.
evening
you-
it out.
I
This would
think
be a vote.
Alfred's a bit too hard.
Alfred. Okay. So it's a 2v2 because Sam is the vote. Final decision comes to me, and due to the fact that I don't think we'll see it in the next 10 years, but in the next maybe 20 to 30, so I'll put it for the time being in meh, because I'm sure there is. We'll just have to wait and see, because that's actually quite an interesting one. But moving on to the next one, it is in fact a TV show based on the stories of Feanor and the Silmarils. So, anybody want to take this one away first?
I would put that
Depends on what
way
they
up there
adapt.
as well.
Way up.
No. Depends
I
on what
would
they adapt, frankly. If they adapt the Silmarillion ones, they aren't that much interesting. You know, the Tremor is born, he gets his brothers, he hates them, he makes the Silmarils, Melkor comes, end of the story. But if they get their hand on something like the Shibboleth, they may do something interesting. But either way, I don't think they will need to add upon a lot of things. So I would put it in Maya.
Maya,
Not
okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's a good storyline, but they'd have to be really picky and like create the storyline that's worth following in a way. But it is a beautiful story, so I would still love to see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm the
Talking,
same. I think Maya is good. It's a good place for it.
talking to you, any final thoughts?
I would probably put that in average, just because it would be incredibly hard to show all of the Valar and all the mightier beings that live in Valinor and, Feanor's time in Valinor. I think it would just be a really, really hard story to pull off.
So I think I agree with that as well. So I believe altogether Maya is the best place for it. I think that's good enough. And because Morgoth is around the same thing, I think we should skip to young Aragon. So this was potentially might have been the show we'd be getting right now, but of course Amazon changed their mind. So firstly, who wants to go with this?
I think I would have put it like in average. I think Amazon did pursue that idea. They were thinking about it. I think it's fine. I've described it elsewhere a couple of times as Middle Earth's equivalent of a Rogue One, which is, it's okay. So I think an average is good.
Yeah, I agree, average. I think it is a good storyline when you look at it from the from Amazon's perspective and from people who don't really know Tolkien's universe as well as everyone who has read all the books. I think following a young Aragon will make it a lot more relatable. I feel like it could potentially be less epic, like a little bit more like fantasy action sort of adventure vibe to it. But I don't know. I would still love to see it. I'm glad they didn't start off with that. I'm glad they started a little earlier.
Yeah, a bit more ambitious, yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think we wouldn't be as excited for the show, in my opinion, if it was just young Aragon, because we basically know the limits to it. But with the Second Age, as many have said, is a setting, not really a narrative. Even though you could potentially say young Aragon would still potentially be a setting, as there's no direct story taken throughout, but we still know the boundaries. So yeah, that'd be interesting. Any final thoughts from anyone? Because it is in the average tier right now.
Personally, I'd be against such a series. I just don't think it has enough information on it. We do know roughly, or actually not even that roughly, his travels, but we don't know that much about what happened specifically. Like if you look at The Hobbit, you get a really detailed account of their travels, and I don't know, when Balin said hi to Bilbo, or smaller things like that, and you don't have that in the young Aragorn canon. And of course there was not a book built over that, so I think it'd be hard for them, and they'd have to end up making up a whole lot of new characters. So for that, I'd probably have to put it in meh.
So I think putting it, even though you have said meh, I think average. I think is what the majority have said. But yeah, I agree with either average or meh. And moving on to the next one, which is I think I'll start off with is one I believe I want to look forward to the most, or I want the most, is a Angmar war
Angmar.
show. Yeah. So who wants to take this one away? Because it's really interesting.
Oh, I would put it in Valor.
Yeah.
Just tremendous potential with it.
Yeah, that would be a
It's
really good
dark.
story. Yeah, Valar or Maiar, either one, probably Valar.
Yeah, I would be more interested. We have more informations and we have more things to see.
Exactly. Just
And it's also dark.
Yeah, really dark. Another thing I like about it is the political aspect of it, as we have Cardolan, Ruda, and I've forgotten the name of the other kingdom.
Arthedain.
Yeah,
Arthedain.
Arthedain. Yeah. So just see them breaking down. Is it Ruda, I believe, actually forms a little alliance with Angmar. So it'll be really interesting. Then we have the elves becoming involved with, I believe it is at the end.
Even the Rohirrim.
Glorfindel, yeah, and Elrond a bit as well.
Glorfindel.
So yeah.
Even
He
the
makes the Witch King flee.
And that's a good idea. One of the things that's good about it is that it ties together all these things that we have seen before, because we've seen Weathertop. And this show will show you why Weathertop is a ruin. And we've seen we've seen Angmar actually. There's been a lot of allusions to Angmar in The Hobbit, especially in all the White Council sequences. So it will tie together a lot of things. It would be pretty.
Although I think they would need to get rid of the Witch King voice. That high-pitched voice, screeching. We can't make a show about it.
Yeah, watch the Rankin Bass Return of the King for comparison. That thing is hilarious.
Yeah, I agree. And while on the topic of villains, I think we should get the Morgoth one underway now. So, the reason
And
I've
just
yeah gone.
what's the Morgoth? Is it a show about
So yeah,
Morgoth or a show about
yeah,
the Elder Days, the First Age?
that's what I was going to say now. So, I
Oh, sorry.
no, it's fine. So I don't really. I wanted to have put Morgoth in here, but I couldn't because it's so hard to adapt. Of course, Silmarillion into a TV show, and the character who's spread, as you rightly said, Enzo, over maybe Year of the Trees, all the way to the end of the first stage. So many. He's been through a lot. So I just think we could just have a first stage show of Morgoth in any period. That's the best I can do. So, Enzo, do you want to start off with that? Just any show in the first age about Morgoth.
Um, yes, I would like to see one. Probably something after the Near Knife. With when Morgoth is triumphant, would give us. Would I don't know if we could concentrate on Morgoth because a show about him as a person wouldn't be that interesting. He's sitting on his throne and nothing happens. But a show about Beleriand during Morgoth's triumph could be very interesting. We've got the Third King slain, we've got the Fall of Gondolin, we've got. Well, I'm not saying these things need to be adapted. We've got a lot of things that are happening, conflicts, and Morgoth being the big bad, overseeing everything. It could give a good show. Would put it in average or Maya.
Interesting. Anybody else have any other opinions of where it should be?
Yeah, I
I
feel
would actually,
average.
Average.
yeah, I'd put it in meh for one simple reason, which is don't think conceptually you can center a show around the villain. Like
Very
you
true.
wouldn't invest emotionally in the villain. So I think that the material of the first age is better covered from the points of view of other characters. And things like Gondolin, Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, the Theft of the Jewels, which is essentially the Fëanor storyline, the Sack of Doriath, the Voyage of Arendelle. That's basically the spine of the first age storyline. Everything
Do
else
you
is
really,
kind
do you really think that the sack of Doriath could make for a good narrative? Because I don't know. Doesn't sound like it has too much to it. You get
when I
Thingol
was
dying.
yeah when I was thinking about this just as a thought experiment as movies, I was thinking of using the Sack of Doriath as a prologue to what would be the Fall of Gondolin storyline.
Oh,
So
but the thing is, they
as a
aren't
short
very.
prologue, it works.
Unfortunately, I haven't put that in there. So yeah. And talking to you, your opinion, where do you think it should be?
I would put it one lower than Ken did. I would put it in Alfred. I just don't think that they can center the show on him, much less, you know, like show his entire life because, well, he was, there in the beginning and he was really there in the end. And I just don't think it would be possible to show that. I think he would make a great villain. I think within the next 1 or 2 decades, we will see him as the villain. He may even pop up in name or something like that in the Lord of the Rings on Prime TV show, but there's no way he's going to be the main character in his own TV series.
You do really want an Alfred one, but again, unfortunately for you, we're gonna have to put it in meh, as that's the average of what everyone has said. So yeah, but maybe we could get one in Alfred, but one I doubt that will be in Alfred is in fact the War of the Last Alliance. Nick, you don't take
That
this one
won't.
away?
Yeah, no, I'm hoping that it will be in the actual show, but if it's not, of course, I hope it's up there in the Valar. Like, I would love to see it because it's just it just it ties it all together, and I want to see that.
Yeah, if you're doing the early part of the second age as a show, you have to do a follow-up on the late part of the second age. You have to.
Yeah, let's
So it
say the
absolutely
show's
comes
already.
up.
Say Lord of the Rings on Prime has finished around the middle around maybe actually be quite hard to see where it finished after the War of the Elves and Sauron, and then this was going to be made after. Then would you really want it in Valor?
I also I do this, I say this under the assumption that it also includes, the fall of Numenor is only, I think, 150 years before the War of the Last Alliance. And so I'm working on the assumption that Amazon will group those two narratives together
Possibly.
into one show.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're very close and they have a causality. Like, Numenor falls, the loyalists reach Middle Earth, and off they go to fight Sauron. And so I think you have to do it.
I don't think the war itself is that. It's just a big battle. A 7-year-long big battle, but a big battle nonetheless.
Yeah, but it's
Maybe-
important on a couple of levels. It provides closure.
Yes, that's the point. It will,
Any number of characters. It does the
I would-
thing which we don't really get anymore, which is the then everyone died the end type of ending, which I love. You need it. You have to show it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would
Yes,
like
yes,
it would be
I
about the
don't
build up as well, like preparing for it, getting ready for it, realizing they had to fight, and possibly also like after, because we don't really get to see much of the after before the Fellowship of the Ring happens either. So rebuilding stuff like that.
There's also some intrigue going on because there's a lot of different factions involved in the battle, and they have, like, I believe Orofair isn't fighting with the other elves, and as a result gets himself killed. So there is some intrigue
Yes.
going on as well.
reason for why I think it should be grouped with a show about Numenor and about the birth of Lothlorien, etc. As a standalone show, I don't think it's that interesting, because even if we got for development, we would rather develop Elendil and his son back in Numenor rather than as kings
Let's
and
say
princes.
then in this show we have the fall of Numenor as well, as Chen said. Would
Or
that
like Calabas.
Vala,
So would that change anyone's opinions?
yes, Vala.
Okay. And talking to you, Alfred?
No, I think Valar or Maiar, I think it would be really hard to show the Second Age without Amazon eventually showing the War of the Last Alliance. So, yeah, it's definitely up there. I think we'll see it.
So yeah, I've put that in my. I think that cultivates and basically summarizes everyone's views on it. And for the next.
Oh, let's save that one for last right there.
Last, yeah, cool. But just to switch it up a bit now, a new shadow. How this
Alfred.
is quite controversial. Who wants to start off with this?
Alfred, and Alfred all the way through.
Average.
Ooh, Alfred,
Mm.
average. Nikki,
Yes.
Yeah, agree.
to which one?
Alfred.
Alfred.
Oh.
Ooh, this is quite interesting. Talking to you.
I don't know. This is a hard one. So is this on specifically on whether or not we'll see it, or is it more on
How much you want to see it?
should
How
we
much,
see it?
No, how much you want to see it?
Meh. I mean, I think it'd be cool to see if maybe they included bits of it, but I don't know how they could do that. I mean, Tolkien himself abandoned it, so it'd be, I'm just gonna say Alfred.
Oh.
I think, we're in a place with serialized filmmaking where we kind of developed an intolerance for finality. I think it's very, very important that at the end of the Return of the King, there is the end cue card at the end. That's incredibly important because, what this story means if they don't really ever have an end. And I think it's important that the last thing,
But I
let's
don't
say
think
on anything Middle Earth, will always be the Return of the King. There will never be anything set in that world after that. I think it's
Yeah, Enzo, why did you put it in average?
because I'm
Put
very
it in
interested
Alfred.
in it. No, I wouldn't. The show would give for most of these adaptations, we know that it ends well. The new shadow gives us a setting where it doesn't end well. We know that men are going to fail, and we are going. The magic is gone now. There are no more elves. It should give a kind of cynical and dark, not in the fantasy sense, but in the more realistic one. You get a show where you see that none of what happened before is going to the long defeat, as Tolkien put it. So that's why I'm putting it in average.
So
I would like to see.
I don't see there being a clear climax, resolution, or anything like that in the story. I don't think it's got the necessary elements.
I know it
Otherwise,
doesn't.
I totally think someone would do it. Whether or not it would be good for the series of Middle Earth, whether or not it would take out the sense of finality, I think that's really irrelevant just because, as we see in Hollywood all the time, they just want a little bit more buck. They don't really care so much about whether or not the story's actually good. Like with the Fast and Furious series, how many movies does that
Yeah.
have in it now? And, especially with TV shows will go on for 5 seasons too long just because they're still making a little bit of money.
yeah,
Sure, but with this franchise, they can, everything in this franchise now is a prequel. Everything has to be set before the Lord of the Rings, and I actually think that's very positive because the Lord of the Rings needs to be the end, the final, like nothing said afterwards. No episode 7, no Mandalorian, no anything that's set after the Return of the King, not by a millisecond. I think that's hugely important from a dramatic standpoint. That it's the end.
didn't
Um,
Tolkien only write 7 pages or something like that as well? Was that the number?
Yeah, and then you realize basically what I was saying, which is if you do
Finality.
something that's set
Well,
after the Return of the King, you kind of take the Return of the King and turn it into a footnote.
he also said that it
I would
was
still disagree.
getting dark and satanic because they turned once more to, if I'm not correct, Morgoth worshipping, or at least he knew that they would go that way, and the boys on the street would end up like pretending to be orcs, and it just took a darker turn than he wanted for his stories.
So yeah,
which is why I'm so interested by it. But Khan makes a good argument. Although I still think that having the new shadow doesn't doesn't render void the achievement of the Return of the King. Sauron will never return. Evil will never. What the appeal of it for me is that it's a story of men. It's men to men. We don't have elves. We don't have Valars. It's men to men in Middle Earth, and it would make the transition between the long past, mythical past, and our own world. As Tolkien himself said, that Middle Earth is our own, the Earth in a distant past. But which I concede.
so yeah, I believe putting in Alfred is the best place to put it, and I agree with the sake of finality. The Return of the King was the end. We don't need more stuff, and if a production or a company was to ever make this, I think they wouldn't have the best interest of Tolkien and the fans in mind, and probably still for some more other reasons. But as we move
That
on,
being said, though,
yeah, go on.
like as a final comment, that being said, is after they've made all of these other prequels and sequels, there might be a hunger for it. But when that time comes, maybe they'll have more freedom to expand on it. But until then, definitely Alfred, yeah.
So yeah, and that's interesting as well what you said, Nikki. But we'll just have to wait and see if there will ever be a hunger for it, and that basically depends on how much Middle Earth we get as well. But moving on to the next one. So I purposely left this because so many people like dwarves and want more dwarven stuff. So all I've said here is just a dwarven show set in the Third Age. I thought it'd be interesting to see what show that could be and how much you want to see it. And I'm going to start off with Tolkien too, because I know you do really like dwarves.
Well, I really do like dwarves, but as much as I do, I don't think there's any specific characters that we can make the protagonist of a show, especially if we're talking second or third age. And I mean, there are some for sure. I just don't think it's necessarily the thing that people would want to go watch, especially with widely dwarves are just drunk Scots, really, and they're not set up very well for a sequel or prequel or anything like that. Unlike dwarves, elves, and men. I'm sorry, hobbits, elves, and men.
Interesting.
So I'd probably put it in average or meh.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like because there is not really a standalone storyline here that really stands out to me about the dwarves, it would have to be like the dwarves in combination with something else. Like
Yeah.
you just
Valor.
include them in a different storyline. Because it's not like it's not enough material to keep people in unless they get the freedom to invent something and create a dwarven story that just happens in between. And of course, The Hobbit. If they do that, that would be it. But not anything other than that. So I would also put it in meh.
Meh.
Yeah, I think the closest we'll ever get to a dwarf series is probably Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy.
Yeah, it's
But who knows? Maybe we'll see a Hobbit. A dwarf trilogy on I don't know the petty dwarves getting eaten by the elves and whatnot.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of wavering because I love the evocation. They love the dwarves, but I think two things. One, we're going to get a fair bit of them this show. And between that and The Hobbit, which was incredibly dwarf centric, I think we've really seen most of what there is to be seen about the dwarves. Because I did think we got a strong sense of their culture, a lot of their history, already. And so I'll put it in average, I think.
Average. Meh. I think. Enzo, what's your final thoughts on this?
Average because there is the possibility of the Balrog.
Mm-hmm. So that's
Yeah, sure.
2 for meh.
I
2
think they should.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'd put mine in meh. My vote's in meh. I think they'd make a really good sort of like subplot in the Lord of the Rings on Prime series. I think they should be pretty big and important in that series. I just don't think they can have their own standalone series. Although, I mean, it is really interesting. It's just we don't have enough detail like we do in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or Children
They
of
had a,
Huron.
they had a movie trilogy. I mean, it was really about dwarves, really,
Yeah.
as movies. So they had a movie trilogy. That's fine.
So I believe the votes are 2-2. So that leaves that to me again. So meh, but the reason I put in average is because I think a lot of people want to see more dwarf related stuff, even though, as you have all rightly said, we have seen a lot in The Hobbit, of course. So I'll leave that there, and at the end of this, after we finish, of course, we can refine this as well, just to let everybody know in the video as well. So yeah, we will of course will be refining this list. But now moving back to the Silmarillion, we have the Fall of Gondolin. How much should
Does
this
this
be a show?
Valar.
does this also
That
include the
question-
Voyage of Arendelle?
Even
The
without the
same
void.
way
Yeah,
that
let's
the
yeah
last
let's say
one.
that. Let's say that. Yeah. So yeah.
Valar.
Valor.
I don't think. Yeah, Valar. I mean, it's the first story Tolkien ever wrote.
Is it?
It's,
Chronologically, it is. Yeah, it is.
yes.
So yeah, I can see a reason for Valar. Nikki, you're talking to.
Yeah, I agree. Valar Maya. It's a very fascinating, beautiful story. I see a lot of potential in it, so they have a lot to play around with there. Yeah.
My vote goes for Maiar, I think.
Damn it, another 2-2. So I'm just thinking I'm going to put it. I think every single 2-2 we've had so far has been Chen and Enzo and Nikki and Tolkien Tubes. I'm saying it. That's all our 2-2s have been so far. But I just think the fact that for this one, I believe that I'll put it in Maya for this one. It is really interesting, but I don't think the Fall of Gondolin is on the same story level compared to the Children of Huron and Beren and Luthien. And I'll let Nikki start off with this one.
That's definitely on my top one, I reckon, just because it's my favorite story from Tolkien of all time. Yes, I am a girl. Yes, it is a love story. Is it cheesy of me to say it? Probably, but it is an epic love story, and there are so many of these that tie into this story, like the Silmarillions, like everything. So it's
Sauron
just a
as a
story that I
werewolf.
would love to see.
Everybody agree with
So yeah,
Valor?
yes.
I'm
I would put it in average. I just don't think it's something that the majority of Tolkien fans, and I'm not speaking for myself here. I just think typically, the Lord of the Rings fans just want the typical adventure sort of story, and I think widely it would not be as popular as the Lord of the Rings outside of the Tolkien audience. So, yeah, average. Or you know what? I'll go Maiar. Maiar.
Could work as a romantic
It's,
comedy.
it's a
We're
great
No,
story.
talking.
I'm kidding.
We're talking.
Truly great story.
It
I
is.
would say three words. Three.
I'm I'm in two minds about this story in general. On one side, it is fantastic love story. And it also is it's fairly connected to things we know as well, so it's a good prequel. Um, and I forgot my third reason as I was talking, but I had another one. But
Well, it doesn't really have to be centered around the love story. It could be more his journey, and then the love story is part of that. So
you
they
just
turn it
remind-
more into an adventure. But
it just
Yeah.
reminded me what it was that I was forgetting. There are versions of this story, mostly in the Book of Lost Tales, the early versions of it, that are more about Luthien than they are about Beren, and I find those very, very stimulating because it's the only female protagonist centric story that Tolkien really gave us. And I'm not talking about it is in any social policy way. It's just different, you know. And so I like that about it. The demerit that I have with it, the issue that I have with it, is that there are some fairy tale touches in that story that I think if Tolkien had the time, I think he would have ironed them out. Like, they turn into, what is it, a wolf and a vampire, sneak into Angband that way. That sort of stuff would be incredibly tricky to pull off without making it like, yeah, we've seen Beorn turn into a bear, but main characters doing it would be incredibly, incredibly tricky to pull off. It's not something we see other characters do at all. It's very, very, very unusual within the context of Middle Earth. Shapeshifting, very tricky.
I mean, shapeshifting is the standard of the story. But frankly, three words: Sauron, rap, battle. I mean, it's
Oh, God.
obviously Valor. It starts with Sauron getting Tol Sirion. He kills Gorlim, and he's very cruel about it. We've got Barahir and his men getting killed slowly one by one. We've got Beren passing through Dungortheb, the place with
Gortheb. Yeah.
yes, one of the scariest places in Middle Earth. We've got Melian, the power of Sauron and Melian clashing. We've got him arriving and crying Tinuviel for Luthien. He comes before he meets Thingol. He goes on to Nargothrond. We see Celegor move in. We've got Finrod.
Yeah, there's
The
a lot
rap
of
battle with Finrod. And then he goes to Angband and she puts Morgoth to sleep. And at the end, you've got the pursuit of Karkor. You've got enough action. You've got enough romance. I think it could make a fantastic story. Valar. And also there's Finrod.
Okay, so
it's very good. It has action in it. It's good. It also has intrigue with Curufin and Celegorm, and if I remember correctly, at one point they try to blackmail Thingol, and he's planning to go to war with them. It's all very good. It just there's fairy tale stuff in it that would be incredibly tricky to do right.
That could be edited out. I mean, they could find another thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to.
Yeah, I tried to do it. I don't know.
So,
Anyway.
I mean, in the story itself, Luthien comes before Morgoth. She gets out of her skin, and she tells him that she's gonna dance, and he's like, "Okay, go." So.
Yeah. So there is so many ways. Okay, so I believe this is again another 2-2. So what do you say again? Talking to you?
I'd put it in Maiar.
So we had Maya for Ken and Talking Tube, and this time Avala for Nikki, and I'm Zobad, aka Enzo. So there's two reasons that I'm going to put it in Valor is because firstly, I think Enzo sold it pretty well there. I'm about to say well done. That was pretty good pitch on why it should be a show, and of course Ken has some relevant counterpoints to that. But yeah, I think the fact that they could potentially change the shapeshifting a bit just to maybe make it more television friendly. And the second reason is because I know how badly Nikki probably wants it in this tier. So,
Oh yeah.
so just for you, I'll put it there. And
I would
you.
add, I would add something. It's the only story where we've got the Dark Lord who appears physically. We never get villains. It's the only one where we get to see Sauron acting like a character, not like a novel looming threat. Even if we do a first age series, we're gonna see more Gosim Angband sitting on his throne and people plotting or something like that. So that's another point for me.
yeah, very true. And then moving on to the last one for today's video is, in fact, A3 Trolls series. So, Talk to you want to take this one away?
Sure. Well, firstly, we may very well see this not by a big production company, but just keep your eyes peeled for that in the next couple of months. But
Ooh,
I think this would be an absolutely fantastic show.
fantastic.
I've got to propose an idea for a higher category, but I mean, if I'm not doing that, then I'd say Valor. I think it's got great potential. Some great comedy. It can be somewhat like WandaVision and take off of some other previous 80s shows, combined with a nice mix of Tolkien.
I would like,
Um,
yeah, go on. I would also like to say that I'm not sure if I don't remember if this is exactly from The Hobbit either, but the book. But they did somehow get some Gondolin weapons. I'm not sure. Is that Tolkien lore or did they
Yes.
make that up? So yeah, maybe you can make a show out of that. Maybe that's quite interesting. But
yeah,
yeah,
I believe the at least one of the Gondolin references came from the swords, and
yeah,
they were
Orcrus.
plundered and then plundered and probably replundered at least two other times. But I think it'd be a fun show. Jokes aside, it would be interesting to see. We won't really see it for sure, but um, or not in an official capacity.
Anybody else?
Yeah, it's a fun thought, a fun idea. I would probably say animated for that one,
I could tell
but
Nick you disapprove. You disapprove 100%.
oh no, it's just it's like the
Wild.
5 orc table read that I was on. Like it's awesome and it's well written and it's so funny, but it's not really Tolkien. It's someone else. So yes, I would love to see it, but not as much as I would love to see the other ones. I guess.
Ken, will your relative opinions do for this show?
I don't know.
Okay,
I mean,
put.
it sounds
Yeah,
funny.
I'm just putting in Alfred. That can go away. And so yeah, that finishes it. But before we finish the video, does anybody have? I'll start off with Ken, and we go down to Talking Tube, then to Enzo, and then to Nikki. Would you do any changes to how it looks right now? Starting off with Ken.
No, I'm happy with it. I think it looks fine. Have really all the stories that I can think of. Certainly, I can't think of much of anything else. Maybe everything else is contained within these stories as a subplot or something. I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's great.
Yeah. Talking Tube.
I would still put the Three Trolls series in Valor. I think that'd be a ton of fun to see. But other than that, I think this list is really solid. A couple of them that are highly ranked, I definitely don't think we'll see, like a dwarf or Feanor series. I don't think we're going to see either of those. But other than that, I think this list is really solid.
Enzo.
So I think it's good. I still think that New Shadow could have deserves some more love, but that's only me.
Should we bring that up again? Anybody have any other opinions on the new Shadow? Does anybody want to see it in Meh? would any of you guys want to see in Meh?
I have a huge dislike of this
Huge.
idea of
Shouldn't have
taking the
asked.
final chapter. I have a huge dislike of this idea of taking the last chapter of a series and then making it not the last chapter. It's happened to way too many movie series in the last couple of years. I
Yeah.
really wouldn't want to see it happen to Lord of the Rings.
They would need a lot more freedom, and based on the Tolkien estate, I don't think that they would do that. And I also don't think Tolkien himself would, if he was alive, I don't think he would say yes to that. So in that respect, I would say definitely keep it in Alfred. Sorry, Enzo.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yep. Sorry, Enzo. And then what was it next? Was it Nikki? I think it was.
It was, and I wouldn't change anything, I don't think. I'm quite happy.
That's good. And what I'll propose is a quite interesting one. So we have put the story of Beren and Luthien and the Children of Hurin over the potential story of Feanor and the Silmarils. Do you think that's fair, having those two above Feanor and his story, and potentially you could do it with the Silmarils?
Yes.
Definitely.
The story of the Children of Hurin is Tolkien's best story outside of the Lord of the Rings. It's fantastic, and so it absolutely belongs up there. Beren and Luthien also very, very good, except for those kind of difficult fairy tale touches which you can write around. I think it's right where it should be.
I think
I
the
suppose
problem
if you make it a long series, you can tie it in so they're all together, but it would be a long series.
I think the problem with the stories about Fëanor is that his characterization is a bit hard to do. Fëanor always flirts between the genius and the jerk. And as a jerk, he isn't the Tony Stark kind of jerk. No, he's a true jerk. He hates his half brothers. He hates his cousin. He hates his stepmother. He has problem with his wife. I don't think it.
Yeah,
I
it would
think
have to be someone else having the lead because he would be somewhat hard to like in some other, or he could be like a co-lead or something, but not him as a person to follow him all the way through the story.
And he isn't even that good of a politician. You could follow a jerk who is in a kind of politic-driven thing, but politics didn't play that big of a role in Arman, and as a king, he isn't that brilliant of a guy. So that's why I put it in Mara.
I think that wraps it up quite well. So yep, I think that's a pretty good list. I think that's good. Of course, with the troll one at the end, that was just in for humor's sake, anyways. But it's been another really interesting discussion and a bit different to shake things up a bit. And I want to thank all the viewers at home for watching this long. I really appreciate it. And of course, I want to thank my guests. Firstly, starting off with Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you, TolkienTube.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And everyone, I do Lord of the Rings YouTube, so check that out in the description.
Of course, and Nikki.
Namaria.
Amazing. And finally, Enzo.
I thank you for inviting me once again.
No problem. And to all the viewers at home and everybody watching, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. But until the next video, my friends, goodbye.